Hello, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name's Adam Hanlon and I'm the editor of Wetpixel. I'd like to introduce you to Alex Mustard, well-known photographer.
Hey, Adam.
Hey Alex, hi,
Nice
how you doing?
Again?
Yeah, nice to see you again. So on one of our previous episodes about manual versus TTL strobe triggering, Rob White asked a question about, first of all, whether we thought that TTL strobe triggering would be any use for fast-moving subjects, and he specifically asked about basking sharks. And the second part of the question is if there's any difference between using electrical cables or using fiber optics. So if I may, I'll deal with the second part first. And the short answer is there are very good systems for both electrical and fiber optic cables. Practically, you can achieve TTL through both systems. There's an increasing move towards fiber optic, which is arguably simpler, but not all cameras will allow you to do it. So the short answer is both work equally well. There's no advantage over a particular connection type in terms of TTL. In terms of the first part, which is a little bit more complicated, and so I guess I'll throw that over to Alex. Alex, do you use TTL when you're shooting fast-moving subjects, particularly possibly basking sharks?
Fast-moving subjects, I'm going to split that up actually. Fast-moving subjects, yes, it can work, but my approach tends to be I'm going to set up for the best possible shot. Yeah. So I'm not really interested in shooting the subject when it's a long way away and my picture's going to be rubbish. I'm going to set my strobe powers to be correct for when the subject is close and I'm going to get the killer shot. I'm not too worried if I underflash it when it's a little bit further away. So I'll generally set up a manual exposure for when I get that really, really special pass, because that's the photo I'm going to show everyone. The rubbish passes I get before then, I'm not going to show people. So that tends to be my approach. That said, I do think TTL can work reasonably well in that situation. But what I don't like about TTL is you're trusting a system to guess the right exposure. And if it guesses wrong when you get that killer pass, how annoying is that? Whereas if you work on manual, you know for sure it's going to get it right when you get that killer pass. So that would be my approach. In terms of basking sharks, there's several reasons why I wouldn't use flash. First of all, legally, although I think it's just a code of conduct, but certainly in the UK, the advice from the Shark Trust and the Marine Conservation Society, I don't remember which, I think maybe together they wrote the code of conduct. But the code of conduct for basking sharks is please take as many pictures as you can because they're very valuable for identifying the individuals, but don't use flash. So actually the official advice is not to use flash with basking sharks. There potentially could be a disturbance. I don't think there's been any study or any approval, but certainly in the UK, it's not encouraged. Practically as well, you need to be maneuverable when shooting basking sharks. And the trick for photographing basking sharks is to be as still as possible and let the shark come towards you. However, to get in position so that you can be as still as possible, you need to swim really hard. So you see the shark coming, you swim really fast to get on its sort of collision course, and then you stop and you absolutely try and disappear. You float right up to the surface, you stay dead still, and then the shark will come towards you with its mouth open. And actually, if you're moving around and trying to change position, that's when the shark closes its mouth. And loads of people, and I think some of the operators have been making this mistake, is they kind of let all their photographers go off and try and get to the sharks. And obviously all the photographers want to be first to the shark, so they all just keep swimming until they get close to the shark, and then they all end up with mouth closed shots. If you want that iconic mouth open shot, the shark needs to basically be totally relaxed when it comes to you. And the way you do that is you swim hard to get in position and let it come to you. And to be able to move in and get in position quickly, you don't want great big strobes off your housing dragging you down. So I wouldn't use them anyway, even if they were legally allowed. And the sharks are so shallow in the water. I'll just show you a basking shark shot here. Wonderful. This is a kind of a classic head-on shark coming towards me, mouth open, super chilled out, and I was not swimming at all here. And the shark is just below the surface, so there was no real need for available light. I have to say, basking sharks are quite hard to expose for because the white in their mouth really, really bright, and with the plankton in the water that they love feeding on, it tends to create a glow in the water as well, and that can be really hard to handle. And they swim around with their mouth open in plankton-rich water. So it's
what
really
they do.
the last place you want to turn strobes on.
Yeah.
You've kind of done a lot of available light shooting with the whale sharks in Isla Mujeres as well, Adam.
Yeah, so we've run Wetpixel's run a lot of trips now to Isla. In fact, this year it's we should be on our way there shortly. Sadly, we won't be, but yeah, I mean, again, same sort of set of problems. They're really big animals. There's a lot of plankton in the water, which is what they're feeding on. They also tend to be very contrasty, and I've got a picture here actually of a whale shark in a vertical feeding sequence, and obviously it's showing its belly, which is white. And real challenge with strobes, you simply wouldn't be able to get the image or light it because it's such a big animal. Similar to what you say though, Alex, the trick with Ela is to get dropped in ahead of the sharks somewhere, try and anticipate where they're going to be, and then remain shallow and let them come to you, and remain still and shallow. And in Mexico, certainly, strobes are not allowed. They're officially banned. So it's an environment where if you put strobes, well, you couldn't swim fast enough to keep up with the sharks, and it just wouldn't work. So it's not really an option. Anyway,
and
yeah.
the dogs don't like it either.
No, the dogs are anti-strobe. Yeah, they definitely are. Yeah.
Zena, my dog, who's under my desk whenever I call you for these shows. She doesn't bark, thankfully, but she does snore. So sorry if you ever hear her snoring.
I'm going to mute my microphone while they see off whoever it is, and let you go back.
I was going to show you a few other examples of when I use available light underwater. And big animals is one of those situations. This picture here is a blue whale photographed in the Indian Ocean of Sri Lanka, and this is a situation where the animal, obviously, it's the biggest animal in the ocean. So when you're dealing with an animal that sort of size, of course, you're not able to light such a big scene up with strobes, and you're never really going to get close enough to an animal like this to really be able to light it up with strobes anyway. So you're choosing to shoot available light from the start. There's also not really a lot of interesting color to light up, and you've got strong tropical sun to bring up all the details. Other times that I will really enjoy shooting available light is, first of all, even when I'm diving with strobes, I think it's important to remember to turn them off a lot. So, for example, this is just a silhouette of a silky shark in Cuba, taken this year. Yeah. And even though I was on a dive, lots of close action, sharks coming in close, big animals, action in open water, it's important to remember to take that variety of images. Yeah. And so it's just a simple shot. I wouldn't want all my pictures like this, but I think this is very graphic and eye-catching.
Yep.
There's plenty of really good underwater photography in shallow water. This picture here is taken in a jellyfish lake in Raja Ampat and taken without flash. This is, again, a little bit of a practical thing in that to get to this jellyfish lake, you have to climb up over a very steep hill and back down the other side. And the last thing you want to do is carry more than you need to over that hill. Yep. So, that was another reason. But in shallow water, available light really captures the atmosphere of being underwater. Yep. And the more flash you put into pictures like this, the more you take that atmosphere away. Yep. Big scenes, so scenes of reefscapes like this one, or this picture here in Iceland of a huge, of the canyon in the middle of the tectonic plates. These are big scenes, and again, they're just too big to light up with flash. And when you've got visibility and you've got these great scenes, particularly in relatively shallow water, they really suit available light shooting. And also big animals, in amongst these environments. This picture here is a seal up in the Hebrides in Scotland, and again, just getting this feeling of the kelp forest. You don't want to be lighting up this situation. So there's lots and lots of times as an underwater photographer that you take pictures without flash. And I think the other big example is schooling fish. Yep. This picture here is kind of a reefscape with schooling fish taken in Tubataha in the Philippines, and being able to you'd never be able to light this sort of scene up with flash. So it's much better to take those strobes down. And I think increasingly, particularly with the rise of freediving photography, we're seeing more and more underwater photography done without flash. Yeah. And people are quite happy to sort of have these heavily white balanced pictures. My picture of the I just showed you, the school was taken with a filter on the camera, which helps keep a really strong blue and allows you to correct the color. But a lot of the freediving shots you see, people just want the model to stand out, particularly the skin tone of the model. And they're quite happy if the water ends up white or grey in the picture. And that's a look that's become, I think, 15 years ago, we'd have been like, oh, that's such a weird look. We don't like it looking so washed out. And actually, these days, people really like that look.
Yep.
Or they certainly like the look of the freediving models
Yep.
In the
Not,
pictures.
they don't like the look of me so much when I'm freediving. But,
No, yeah, well, we've already got the wrong skin tone
yeah,
and shape.
it's all down to skin tone, yeah.
Yeah. And then the final example, which I think we use available light a lot as underwater photographers, is shipwrecks.
Yeah.
And this is another magic filter shot of the Kittiwake wreck in the Cayman Islands, just taken a few days after she was sunk. Actually, it's a very early picture of her when there was still a lot of the paint color on the wreck. But
really
you can just see how, shooting with available light doesn't mean you can't have color underwater when you're using these techniques correctly. Yeah. And I know you've done a lot of wreck photography as well with available light.
Yeah, this is a picture of the Giannis D, which is a very iconic wreck at Abu Nahas in the Red Sea, and this was shot with a Keldon color correcting filter, and again, same sort of approach. It allows you to retain the colors, the beautiful colors in the wreck and the blue in the water when you actually process it. So again, very similar idea. There's no way you could light the scene up with a strobe. This is definitely, and the combination of ambient light and a filter works really well in this circumstance, I think. Yeah.
And I think one of the things is, these days, particularly with the processing power of our software, we can color correct our pictures really well. The advantage of using a filter is it's giving you a better starting point.
Yeah.
And particularly because that filter blocks blue light,
yeah,
it stops the water becoming too bright, and therefore it helps you keep this strong blue background.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the areas it really helps with, is using a filter. So you've got a better file coming in, you get a better file going out. You can say this about any aspect of underwater photography. There's lots of, you can take any picture with any technique.
Yep.
And the more you refine that technique, the better the quality of your results. And one of the things that, the Wetpixel forums have always been about is about getting the best quality results, not just getting a result.
Yep.
And filters for me are a way to get the best quality out of your wide angle available light photography.
Yeah, sure. So going back to Rob's question, whether we'd use TTL on fast moving subjects, I guess the answer is both of us would say rarely. There might be very specific circumstances, but it'd be fairly rare. And would we use them for big animals? And obviously, he mentions basking sharks. I think probably the answer is again rarely. Most of the time, we'd probably be shooting ambient light and possibly using a filter. But obviously, then expanding that into more general ambient light shooting, there's lots of circumstances where we are just going to use ambient light and allow that to light our scenes.
Yeah, I would say particularly with fast moving animals, I'll generally choose not to use a filter because I think you want as much shutter speed as you can get in those situations. And basking sharks, because they're in relatively dark water, I wouldn't use a filter with basking sharks because I just want as much shutter speed as possible with those subjects so that you get that sharpness. Yeah. And it's easy to say, well, I'd love to be always shooting at 1/500th of a second. I can assure you in the cloudy skies of Scotland, getting to those sort of shutter speeds is not that practical. Yeah. So you're always fighting those boundaries.
Yeah.
I think the other important thing to stress at the end is with a lot of big animals in places around the world, use of flash is either prohibited by law or strongly advised against by codes of conduct, and that's something that's important to think about. Yeah,
you need to do your research before you jump in the water and make an unfortunate mistake. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Rob, I hope that's answered your questions. Thank you very much, Alex. You can see more of Alex's work on his Instagram channel, which is at, what do you call yourself on Instagram?
Alex Mustard 1.
Right, Alex Mustard 1. There's only one.
Well, there must be one other.
There's more than one, actually, that means, I guess. So that's great. Please feel free to ask any more questions in the comment section beneath this video. Subscribe to the channel, and obviously if you like the video, please like it, and I look forward to seeing our sponsor for this episode was Keldon, so thank you very much to Keldon, and we look forward to seeing you in the future episode. Thank you very much. Bye.